My name is Tim Carter. This is a lesson for Koine University. Koine University is an extension of the Apologetic and Outreach Ministry. IamKoine.org. That is a ministry by Landmark Missionary Baptist Church in Jacksonville, Arkansas. We meet at 2200 Marshall Road. This lesson is basically a question about a learning organization, for example, a seminary. And some people have very different views of seminary. So, should seminary, it's a question, should, for example, should seminary shake? And let's just say students. And let's say a word that's very common in academics, and that would be schemata. There we go. Well, should a seminary do that? Well, in a learning organization, it's deliberate, it's by design, and it actually provokes learning, catalyzes learning. So asking the question is really just to provoke thought and to distinguish core elements of a learning organization. And that's also inside this book, Historical Holistic Hermeneutics, which is online at IamKoine.org under Koine Books, the book tab, and it speaks of learning, for example, tacit knowledge, which is more implied than explicit. Tacit knowledge has a lot of emotion attached to it. It's where people are invested emotionally with something. We've been primed according to something. So we have a predisposition or a bias toward it. It becomes our preference, which is a word, it means heresy. We all have preferences, but damnable heresy. The word heresy has a negative connotation to it, where no matter when you use it, it's always bad, but that's not actually correct. So, for example, just a brief article on schema theory. The schema is our knowledge. That is, for people, let's say if you've ever met someone that says they are, we know the historic schema. There's Calvinism, for example, and then there's that against which it came as a response to what they call Arminianism, and you can find room on your dry erase board to write that. But this is what's meant by the word a construct, for example, or a schema. Someone has this schema. Now, here's this antithetical construct, so it's more or less they conflict, but people actually build support for this, and this is done in every field of learning and study. People, cultures develop based on this. Ideologies are formed, and then someone will come along and support it. And this is where it's very subtle. If you're not careful, you won't notice that you're supporting a schema, which provides a scaffolding, if you will. But it'll become so elaborate that in the research I'm doing for a dissertation work, I'm evaluating how do people respond. Well, within a seminary, for example, it's a learning organization, and it's very interesting if you go back over, let's say you were to evaluate a seminary, for example. Well, as a student, you can't do that because you're too busy recovering from your the shake, if you will, the shake up in your schema where it's been challenged. You know, you come in and you walk into a seminary classroom and you tout a schema. You say you're pre-trib. Well, you'll find it'd probably be great. Say whatever you want. It's just that when it comes to studying the text, knowing what it means in context, these things then, these constructs, they start being replaced as you're learning of the actual Bible. All of a sudden, you learn that context is where you come to have actual knowledge. And then you will find yourself not near as emotionally angered, if you will, if that's the best way. When you hear someone say this, your thoughts won't be to just tear that down. It will be to evaluate first. Then you'll define, document, and then you can disclose the fallible elements. And then in doing so, you gain actual knowledge, as opposed to sometimes we can be so biased toward our construct or our schema that we'll just throw in the kitchen sink if it would help prove it, as somehow that becomes the goal. But that's not the goal in a learning organization. For example, if you've never attended a seminary, but let's say you attend the Missionary Baptist Seminary in Little Rock, and I'm aware of several decades now of its history. Let's say we had engineers. An engineer was a teacher of ours. We had lawyers who were teachers, educators who were teachers. All of them were subject matter experts. All of them were, let's say, competent in their field of expertise. And they were very good at communities of practice. Those communities of practice, that is language. We had language experts. We had hermeneutic, people who specialized in hermeneutics, theology. So language, hermeneutics, and theology. So all of those were there in the same educational institution. So that learning organization was very, let's say, heavily invested in hard sciences, critical thinking sciences, professional thinking, and then the level, they were subject matter experts. They had a high level of professionalism, training, so they knew what it was to labor in these fields. So they had all this, and then of course they specialized, and then of course you would even see students form these communities. Language students would hang out with each other, and more of a, I don't know, it almost would naturally divide, but you get a big surprise when you think, well, I want to avoid the languages. When you step into theology, you'll find out it's more difficult than everything, because languages and the science of hermeneutics is preparing you to be a theologian, and that's a difficult work. But yes, seminaries should shake schema. So if you go to seminary and you say you're a post-trib, premillennial, young earth, King James only, dispensationalist, whatever all that is, all those are schema. And then what would happen is, in the learning organization, first thing you'll be challenged, and that's what the first thing is you're challenged by all of your well, let's just say you have a large investment, and it's usually emotional. It's an emotional investment in those particular schema. Let's say you're big on the gap theory, or you're big on some point of Calvinism, or you're anti-Arminian, so you have a lot of biases. Well, the reason why you're challenged is to bring all this emotion to the surface, and it's more or less for self-learning. You have to learn about yourself. And then once you learn about your own biases, then that achieves the next thing. Once you're challenged, you achieve this self-awareness. Several people who've attended the seminary, the one of which I'm most aware in Little Rock, the Missionary Baptist Seminary, can tell you that had they attended seminary longer, they wouldn't know anything. Meaning they now know what it means to actually know something. So your knowledge becomes more explicit rather than tacit. So this starts to be replaced with explicit knowledge. You become more objective. This would be what we call text-based, as we consider the Bible our rule of faith and practice. And then in this process of having your biases realized and your emotions processed, you start to develop character, and then you learn about yourself, and then this awareness, you begin to acquire that. So yes, seminary, specifically Bible seminaries, should shake students' schemas and schemata, that is plural. I don't want to be incorrect about how important it is to be correct. So it's good exercise. If you ever study any field of study, you'll find that this is what takes place. But you don't find a lot of people biased about chemistry, physics, or calculus, because those are hard sciences. Well, you'll find out that as you study, the Bible and Bible knowledge is a hard science. It's factual. We can know from grammar, from context, from syntax, from etymology, things like that. And then you can challenge schemata at a different level. But some people really get emotional when their schema is shaken, and it does a picture that in my mind is just like someone who's involved in scaffolding. It's not a place where they want to be. You know, they don't want to be involved in scaffolding that they have built, let's say, and they're here and they're hanging on, and they find out and you start challenging it, they begin to act as though they're falling, and they begin to become very emotional and concerned. The truth is, you need your schema shaken, and we need the things that aren't really sure and concrete, that is text-based in the Bible. And I noticed whether you're evaluating Calvinism, Arminianism, theism, open theism, closed theism, you're evaluating monergism, synergism, total depravity, conditional, unconditional election, limited, unlimited atonement, the resistibility or irresistibility of grace, perseverance of saints, preservation of saints, whether you're evaluating dispensational, whatever it is, people seem to have, if they're not from a learning organization and or they're not in a church where they actually teach and go through the lessons, or if they've never studied the science of interpretation, for example, let's say they've never approached it. Everyone has a hermeneutic. Everyone has a science of hermeneutics. Your science might be falsely so called. It might not be a process that's repeatable. It may not be something that's credible or reflects the accuracy of the Bible, but you have one. Everyone has a hermeneutic of some kind. It may just be repeating what you were taught. It may just be going along the bandwagon effect, or it may just be either-orism, where you were taught the 5 points of Calvinism or the 5 points of Arminianism, which can be pointless if you never study the Bible, by the way. Or maybe you just picked up some jargon. The Bible talks about seed collectors in the book of Acts. People just pick it up and somewhat repeat what they're told. But if you don't go back to the text, but somewhere, whether it's in your church or whether it's in a seminary or a class in your church in an education program like Sunday school, you really need to have your schema challenged and seek people out. I personally welcome feedback from all over the world now that we have this worldwide web, internet, YouTube platform feature. We just received analytics today that we're almost 170 countries now, so that's quite remarkable. And we're receiving feedback from all over the world. So it's something that's good for both the teacher and the learner, and it's also good for the learning organization. So yes, you might know of teachers who appear to come from different perspectives or to support different schema, but it's good. It's very good for the opposing schemata, that is, if there's more than one, and it's good for the learner. But to become exasperated is to go the wrong direction, and then to throw your hands up or to malign someone or ad hominem attack the person. It's just an indicator that you're not really pursuing knowledge. You're just picking sides and preferring a schema which does nothing to develop the person. So yes, seminary should shake students' schemata. Have a blessed day.